There is a tennis tournament in Paris every year. The best players in the world show up. And for 20 years, it barely mattered who came, because one man had already won. Rafael Nadal won the French Open 14 times. He reached the final on 14 occasions. He won every single one. In 112 matches at that tournament, he lost 4 times. Bjorn Borg, the next closest, won it 6 times. But this isn't a story about titles. It's a story about a boy from a small town in Mallorca, an uncle who pushed him to tears, and a body that was breaking for most of these 14 years. This is that story. Rafael Nadal was born on June 3rd, 1986, in Manacor, a small town on the island of Mallorca. His father ran a glass and window company. His mother gave up her perfume shop to raise him. His uncle Miguel Angel was a professional footballer who played for Barcelona and the Spanish national team. And his uncle was a tennis coach at the local club, across the street from his family home. When Rafa was 3 years old, Tony introduced him to tennis. At that stage, Rafa's real passion was football. He played in the streets, he had real ability. His father later said he could have made a professional career of it, but Tony spotted something and started coaching him. He trained Rafa on poor courts with old tennis balls deliberately to teach him that it wasn't the equipment that decided if you won or lost. He believed the only person responsible for winning or losing was the player themselves. Sessions began with a 40-minute warm-up without a water break. Sometimes just one ball was used for an entire 2-hour session. Rafa's travelling coach lost count of the number of times he saw him come home in tears because of how hard his uncle worked him. There was no mercy in Tony, no softness. If Rafa complained about a bad bounce, Tony ignored him. If the court was bad, if the balls were old, if the conditions weren't fair, none of it was an excuse. You deal with what's in front of you, and you endure. At 8 years old, Nadal won an under-12 regional championship. At 11, he won the Spanish and European titles in his age group. At 12, the Spanish Tennis Federation offered him a scholarship in Barcelona. The family turned it down. They stayed in Manacor. Rafa kept training with Tony. He turned professional at 15. At 16, he won his first ATP match. And at just 14, before he'd even turned professional, he beat Carlos Moya in an exhibition match. Moya was then a top 10 player in the world. Nadal was 14. This wasn't luck. This was built deliberately over years in a small town most people have never heard of. To understand what Tony actually created, you have to understand his philosophy at its root. Most coaches at the elite level are trying to build confidence. They protect the player's belief, they manage the environment, they make sure the athlete feels good. Tony did the opposite. He believed the worst thing you could do was shield someone from difficulty. Because on a tennis court, when it matters, when everything is on the line, nobody's going to shield you. You're alone out there. The crowd, the opponent, the conditions, all of it is working against you. And the only question is, can you endure? So Tony manufactured suffering. He would make sessions deliberately harder than they needed to be. He would put Rafa in situations where he couldn't win, where the outcome was almost beside the point. What mattered was whether he kept competing when it became unbearable, and Rafa did, every time. Tony said it later. The most important thing I taught him was not to give in when things were difficult, because that's what separates people who win Grand Slams from players who don't. Not the forehand, not the serve, not the footwork. The capacity to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. Rafa describes the feeling on a tennis court this way: I always feel like I'm fighting against myself more than against my opponent. That internal war, that's what Tony built, and it's what took 14 titles out of a body that should have given up years earlier. Here's what most people don't know about Rafael Nadal. The body he competed in for most of those 14 titles was not a healthy one. In 2004, a stress fracture in his left ankle forced him to miss Roland Garros, Wimbledon, and the Athens Olympics. In 2005, an injury on the sole of his left foot ended his season early. His knees started giving him serious trouble around 2008 and only got worse from there. By 2009, at Roland Garros, he said, I have been playing with pain on my knees for some months now, and I simply can't go on like this. The pain was limiting certain movements in my body, which affected me mentally as well. He went out in the 4th round that year, his only exit before the quarterfinals across his entire Roland Garros career. In 2012, his knees deteriorated so badly he had to withdraw from the Olympics and the US Open. He spent months in rehabilitation. There were stretches where nobody knew if he would come back, where the question wasn't whether he could win another major, it was whether he could walk without pain. And every time he came back, not because the body was recovered fully, because he endured it. And then came 2022. Rafa was 36 years old. He had a chronic foot condition called Muller-Weiss syndrome, a degenerative bone disease in his left foot. There's no cure. He arrived at Roland Garros on painkillers. For 2 weeks, he played with a numb foot, painkilling injections every single day just to get through each match. His opponent in the final, Casper Ruud, later said he had seen Nadal on crutches the morning after the final. The morning after, Nadal won that final 6-3, 6-3, 6-0. His 14th French Open title on a foot that shouldn't have let him walk, let alone compete, let alone win without dropping a single set. That, more than any stat, more than any streak, is who Rafael Nadal was. Now the numbers. But first, you need to understand why clay is different. Every surface in tennis rewards certain qualities. Hard courts reward power, grass rewards speed and serve. Clay slows everything down. It gives the ball extra bounce. It neutralizes big servers. It rewards the player who can move the longest, run the most, and outlast everyone physically. Clay is the surface that punishes weakness the hardest. And on clay, Nadal built the longest winning streak in tennis history. 81 consecutive matches won, 2005 to 2007, a record that still stands. He arrived at Roland Garros for the first time in 2005, aged 19, and won it. The first man to win on debut since Mats Wilander in 1982, the youngest since Michael Chang in 1989. In the semi-final of that first tournament, he beat Roger Federer, the world number one. He was only 19 years old. From 2005 to 2004, he won 9 of the 10 French Opens held. Then from 2017 to 2022, he won 5 of the 6. Of his 14 finals, 4 were won without dropping a single set. His overall record at the tournament, 112 wins, 4 losses, 14 finals, no defeats. He won 96.5% of every match he ever played at Roland Garros. In the history of that tournament, or any Grand Slam, no one has come close. Imagine if one team won the Premier League 14 times in 20 years. Imagine if one runner won the Olympic 100 meters final 14 times. That's the scale of what happened in Paris. Every year for 20 years, one man, one city, one answer. You can't tell the story without talking about Federer, because the two of them defined what the other was. Federer was a genius, the man who made tennis look like it cost him nothing. 237 consecutive weeks as world number one, 8 Wimbledon titles, every record the game could offer, and every year at Roland Garros, Nadal beat him. Not just beat him, exposed something in him. Nadal won all 6 of their meetings in Paris. In best of 5 set matches on clay overall, 7 wins from 7. It didn't matter how good Federer was anywhere else. On that surface, Nadal had an answer for everything he brought. From 2005 to 2008, Nadal stopped Federer completing the Korea Grand Slam 4 years in a row. Federer could win every other title. Paris was Nadal's. Federer eventually won the French Open in 2009, but only because Nadal, hampered by his worsening knees, lost in the 4th round. The 1 year Federer got his French Open title was the 1 year Nadal wasn't healthy enough to stop him. That tells you everything. Federer himself said it. Nadal's record at Roland Garros is one of the greatest achievements in the history of sport, and Federer is not a man who gives those awards away easily. Their rivalry is one of the great stories in sport. 2 different kinds of greatness. Federer's was beautiful, effortless, inevitable. Nadal's was earned, painful, relentless. 2 totally different mechanisms. One court decided which one won, and on that court, in that city, in that tournament, it wasn't even close. A 3-year-old boy chasing a ball across the court in Mallorca, 40-minute warm-ups without water, 2-hour sessions with a single ball, coming home in tears, a knee giving way since 2008, needles in a foot that had no business being on a tennis court, a 6-3, 6-3, 6-0 final, on crutches the next morning. After his last match as a professional, Nadal said this: "The way I would like to be remembered is as a good person from a small village in Mallorca, a kid who followed their dreams and achieved more than what I ever dreamed. 14 French Open titles, 112 wins, 4 losses, 14 finals, no defeats. Not talent, not luck, not the equipment, not the course, not the conditions, just what Tony drilled into him from the age of 3. When you want to stop, don't. When the body is failing, endure. When nothing is fair, endure." That one word carried across 20 years, 14 titles, one word. That's the whole story.